Welcome again. I'm Daniel Fabio at Global Genes. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Education. This is the Rare Advocacy Exchange, which we've been doing a series of great panel discussions like this one. They are now all collected in one place where you can rewatch the ones you've missed. And it's the same place you went to register for this. If you want to catch the recordings of the sessions you may have missed or rewatch them, you can see those on the slide right now. And this session is Knowing the Rights of Your Rare Child or Yourself. We've got a great panel for that. Of course, we can't do any of this without our sponsors. A lot of wonderful support from all of these sponsors. We're very grateful to all of them. So with that, I would like to introduce Kelley Coleman, who had a great career as a Hollywood film development executive. She's a rare mom. Her son for many years was undiagnosed, and just recently they got his diagnosis of RENU, R-E-N-U. And she wrote an amazing book called Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child, Your Guide to the Essential Systems, Services, and Supports. So you can see why she's a perfect moderator for this session. I'm so excited to have her and all the panel, and I will now give it over to Kelley to introduce the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much for having all of us and for all the work you do, and Daniel and the Global Genes team for the Rare Advocacy Exchange. As he mentioned, definitely go back and watch any of the sessions you've missed and watch this one a couple times as soon as it's posted. This is a really important one that is near and dear to all of our hearts, because as soon as you are in the rare disease world, you are an advocate and you are experiencing advocacy. There are so many things, big picture and tiny details, that we advocate for. Today, our goal is for you to walk away feeling empowered, not only to be the best advocates, but with new and concrete information that you didn't have before. These panelists are awesome. I will let them give their own big introductions, but we'll start with Michele. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and why it is that you are doing this work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Global Genes, for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about advocacy, specifically in air travel. My story actually is I have a child also with a disability, and he has a spinal muscular atrophy. And I learned really early on that traveling with someone with a disability in air travel is extremely difficult. And at that time, back in 2010, and we had our first, I would say, bad experience. I wasn't really looking to create an organization. I was just looking to join an organization that was doing work in this space. And I learned that there wasn't. And so I wanted specific things done, like a wheelchair spot on airplanes. And after talking to the FAA and different organizations, I just thought, well, it's going to be easier if I test it myself. And so here we are 15 years later, basically, with a thriving organization in accessible air travel. And I did see someone in the chat from Frisco, Texas. So I'm also from Frisco, Texas. So a little shout out for hometown.
And her organization is called All Wheels Up. And I know on the website, all of the links will be posted, and I'll mention those at the end as well. You're awesome. I've been following you forever. So Benita, would love to hear your story. You have a different inroads to the rare disease world than the rest of us on this panel. You are doing so many things in so many lanes. Would love you to try and recap all the things you're doing and just your personal experience and how that has impacted your work.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you to Global Genes for this opportunity to be part of this amazing group of panelists. So I am not a parent. I'm instead an adult with rare disease that I only got diagnosed with, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, connective tissue disorder, only about a decade ago, in my 30s. However, I have had some challenges of some kind every year since I was born. We used to think that it was because I was born premature, except I have a twin sister. We're fraternal, and there's no way that it was just because it was premature birth, because she was obviously also premature. I always say I won the genetic lottery. Um, but that being said, what got me into this space is I'm a self-advocate, or rather self-accommodation expert, because I have been self-accommodating for myself since I was a child. So you can't tell by looking at me because I'm wearing contact lenses. But if I was wearing my glasses, you could tell instantly. Clearly, I'm very nearsighted. Clearly, I have a disability. And so because of that, I struggled all my life in school. I don't know how I managed to graduate and did very well. I did it all on my own. No help, no accommodations, no nothing. And against all odds, I managed to go to college when they said I wouldn't be able to. I managed to get my paralegal certificate. I managed to get a JD. I have amblyopia, which is only impacts about 5% of the population for children. It is one of, if not the leading cause of monocular blindness. I wasn't expected to make it past fourth or fifth grade for whatever reason. That's what doctors told my parents. And I've had to be the one to kind of advocate for myself and educate my parents, educate society in general, that just because you think I can't doesn't mean that I can't. I've had to really encourage people to realize that children really are the experts of their own bodies, of their own health, even though they may not be able to verbalize whatever it is that's going on with them. And so I have a different perspective right there for parents and for children as well, why self-advocacy really becomes important, because parents, as well-meaning as they are, as well-meaning and caring as they can be, they have their own biases. And frankly, they don't have the lived experience as their child. They don't live in their child's shoes. So what got me interested in the rare disease space is my own diagnosis, but also my background as someone who's an attorney, as someone with an employment law and disability background, as someone with chronic pain, chronic illness. What a lot of people forget, rare children turn into rare adults. And the accommodations they might have had in school don't necessarily transfer into the workplace. And so that's why I'm a huge proponent and advocate for self-accommodation, as well as, of course, reasonable accommodation wherever that is actually available. I just started my own company. I'm launching the website this weekend, just literally just was tweaking it, Thrive at Work Consulting, where I partner with HR professionals, where I partner with employees, where I partner with different organizations to bridge that gap, because a lot of companies think they know what accommodations are, think they know what people need, but if you don't have chronic pain, chronic illness, disability, which of course all of us with rare diseases have in some shape, way, or form, you can't really understand what it is that people need. And as we see a growing number of people entering the workforce or staying in the workforce, developing chronic pain, chronic illness, disability, diagnosed later in life with rare diseases, it's going to become more and more important for people to know about accommodations, what is available, whether it's through the interactive reasonable accommodation process, or whether it's stuff you can find and do on your own, self-accommodation. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you so much. And when we all spoke earlier, self-advocacy was such an important discussion point. And as parents, I know we learn so much from self-advocates, and our kids all have very different diagnoses. And we are such proponents of teaching our children self-advocacy, for all the reasons you mentioned. So thank you for being a role model, because we need as many of those as we can get. Our last panelist, Bo Bigelow. Bo, I would say that rare disease probably changed your life and your career and what you do day to day. You have an impressive list of accomplishments and things, and perhaps more hours in a day than the rest of us. Would love for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kelley. That's an understatement. First of all, thanks a lot for having me, and thanks to Global Genes for putting this panel together. I'm really excited to be on this with these powerful people. I feel like both of you guys, Michele and Benita, were talking about something that Daniel and I say all the time. We're like, you need a thing in rare disease land, and it doesn't exist, so you have to make it. And so that's kind of, I feel like that sums up our experience, my wife and me, from the get-go. So our daughter Tess is 15. She has an ultra rare genetic disorder. It's so rare, it didn't have a name. She was only patient number 8 in the world when we got her diagnosis. And now we're coming up on 300 patients that we know of worldwide. It's now called Howe Fountain syndrome. And we created our foundation in order to raise some money and fund some research, but also find more patients. So that's one of the things that we've done. But I kind of happened into rare disease, into disability rights law, because when Tess was really little, we moved out of New York City. I was working at a law firm there and basically working like that 80-hour, 100-hour week, like just went to work and came home and really didn't see my kids very much at all. And Tess wasn't even 1 year old yet. And we moved to Maine and for my wife's job. And when we got here, my plan was to just kind of plug into a firm here and start working here. I took the Maine bar and I was ready to go. But once we arrived, we realized Tess had a lot of stuff going on and I couldn't really go to work. So it's like you said, Kelley, like I took a pretty hard pivot, didn't go back to work, stayed with Tess at home until she was 6 and could go to kindergarten. And at that point, started looking for part-time legal work. And so I was drawn to disability rights law because a lot of it has to do with schools, IEPs, education, really figuring out, how do you help somebody like Tess, get the most out of her education and really like thrive at school. I'm really excited to say Tess is in our public school system here. We're right outside of Portland, Maine, and she just started high school and she's doing great. So I'm really excited about disability rights law in general.
I think many of us never grew up thinking we'd be this excited about disability rights law, but holy cow, I'm really excited about it. Speaking of which, would love to just have a quick primer from each of us on some of these laws that are the most important and relevant that we will be using in our advocacy. Benita, can you give us a quick overview of the ADA, please?
Sure. So the ADA, as most of you probably are familiar, is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. It covers 5 different titles. Title 1 is employment law, or employment, I should say. So organizations of 15 employees or more are covered under the ADA. So prohibiting discrimination in that respect. Title 2, of course, is for state and local governance, so access to state and local governance. Title 3, I think, is public transit. Also very important area, not necessarily airline. Airline is the Airline Carrier Access Act. That's separate, but public transport such as trains and buses would fall under this category. Religious organizations I know are typically exempt. Public accommodations, so think of restaurants and doctor's offices and hotels and any sort of public entity. So that's another area that's covered under the ADA. And just as an overview of person with disability, ADA specifies that person with disability is someone with substantial impairment of a major life activity. So think like walking, eating, seeing, etc. Under the ADAA, that was actually expanded, so it covers more episodic conditions as well. So now diabetes, kidney disease, epilepsy, or I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure, all those types of conditions, autoimmune conditions, so invisible conditions, anything autoimmune, those are now covered under ADAA. Epilepsy is another good example because, it's not constant, thankfully. So those conditions are a record of disability. So you have a record of a disability. That's pretty easy. If you have medical records, you've got the medical documentation. Or you could be someone who's perceived to have a disability. If you're perceived to have a disability, even if you don't have medical records formalizing a diagnosis, you're still going to be covered under the ADA because there's a perception that, okay, this person has a disability. So an example, someone like me, if I wear my glasses, I'm definitely perceived as someone with a disability. If I wear my contacts, not so much. So that's an example of a distinction. So those are the broad areas where we see protection for people with disabilities. All these different types of areas are areas where people with disabilities, including people with rare diseases, have encountered difficulties. They have seen and experienced discrimination firsthand, just trying to go into a restaurant or a hotel, schools, obviously. They have seen and experienced discrimination trying to take a train or a bus. So those are the different areas.
Thank you. And I think it's also worth noting the ADA has only been in place since 1990. That was the year the movie Home Alone came out. So like not a long time ago. And there are disabled leaders now who are a part of that and who were around before that. So it's worth acknowledging that we're very fortunate to live in a moment in time when it exists. Something else we're very glad exists is the ACAA. Michele, can you give us that overview, please?
Yeah, absolutely. The ACAA, which is the Air Carriers Access Act, is the law that actually prevents discrimination against passengers with disabilities in air transportation. And that law was actually created in 1986. So before the ADA, there's this myth that, the airlines were able to sidestep the ADA, and that isn't the case. It's that there was a law already in existence specific to air travel, and this ACAA was actually the blueprint and the launching point for the ADA, and they took a lot of lessons learned, the good and the bad, to be honest, and from here they were able to build a more robust ADA because of this law.
Thank you. And for those folks here who are international, these are laws in the United States. And worth noting, Michele's a great example. If there's something that you are not seeing in your community or even in your country, perhaps use these as a springboard. There's a lot of great information and rights and access, especially. And with access, education is often the cornerstone of so much of that. Bo, can you please tell us about IDEA?
Sure. That's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And what it essentially does is it guarantees special education and related services for people who qualify under 13 different categories of disabilities. So the ones that I see most often are autism. Dyslexia is a huge one here in Maine. And what it basically says is it looks at the condition that you have and tries to figure out a way to give you the instruction, the individualized instruction or the services that you need in order to get the education that's appropriate given your deficits in a certain area.
Thank you. And as I'm looking through my questions, we're going to have to condense a little bit because this is not an 8-hour session. When we are entering into a situation, either as a parent of a child or as a self-advocate, that we are going to need to know advocacy, how do we even begin when there's so much out there to know what our rights are walking into a certain situation? And I'll open that up for any of our panelists.
I guess I'll jump in, specific to air travel. So if you are about to embark on air travel, one, of course, just know what your rights are and understand, what are the laws that protect you. In addition to this ACAA, they actually have the passengers with disabilities Bill of Rights. And that's basically, 10 very specific rights that you have quick access to for really, layman's term, understanding. And just understanding those and bringing that information with you to the airports and on the plane. And, if, for example, they're trying to force you off of the airplane before your wheelchair is at the gate, you can show them that this is your right and you can wait for your wheelchairs. And just the other big thing about just advocating is speaking up. I hear about so many people who don't even ask. And so that is the biggest thing. Like, if you don't ask, then how would you even know that the answer is going to be no? So just if you're not comfortable with one person lifting you, ask for two. That is there for you. So, these are things that I'm just a big proponent on, is just ask.
And Bo or Benita, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So when it comes to education law, I just put something in the chat. This is called rightslaw.com, and it's a really good place to start if you're just have some questions. There's a ton of FAQ stuff in there on everything related to special education, 504 plans, anything along those lines. Because I think when you get into that system, school districts really don't want to stop and explain things to you. They do a lot better if you don't understand your rights. And so we have plenty of people who come into my firm now who literally work in the school system where their kids are going, and they don't understand how it's supposed to work. They don't understand their rights. And so I really think educating yourself before you even go into your first IEP meeting or even ask for that IEP meeting, you got to do that. And rights law is a great place to start. And I think also another thing I'll put in the chat is if you need to get an advocate to come with you, there's an organization called COPA, COP with two A's, COPAA, and they have offices in every state in the country, and you can get an advocate to come with you to an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting, just so you can understand your rights. Having another person in the room who's on your team really can make the school district start to behave a lot differently.
I would add to that. I'm seeing a lot of discussion in the chat as well, and I agree to everything that Bo just said. To that, I would also add, have an advocate with you, brings another person with you. I would say from a patient perspective, let's say, for example, you're at the doctor's office. We get this all the time, right? You can, if you're in the United States, if you're in a one-party jurisdiction, consent jurisdiction, that means you can actually record without them knowing that you're recording. If you're in a two-party jurisdiction, you can Google this to confirm whether your state is a two-party consent jurisdiction or not. Obviously, be very careful. I would not recommend that you record without their knowledge because that's actually illegal, but you can maybe ask. A lot of people get around their hesitation by saying things like, oh, I have brain fog, which is a legitimate, issue. And I have memory issues, and that's why I need to record. Some places they'll agree to it and they'll let it slide. Other places they might fight you on it, and technically, legally, they can, but again, that's also another kind of accommodation situation. Many places have patient advocates in their at their office, so maybe you can reach out to them. Certainly, hospitals have patient advocates as an actual individual or office that can help you if you're running into barriers. And I would say a great resource in the United States, it used to be called Protection and Advocacy. It's now generally referred to as disability rights, fill in the blank, whatever state you're in. This is the office that is designed and designated for advocating for people with disabilities. I interned at mine in New Jersey decades ago when I was in college, so I know it's a fantastic agency. They assist people with all sorts of things, from vocal rehab to education to technology and so on and so forth.
And I think it's so important as we are advocating to remember that accommodations are not extra. They are quite often the law, and they are access. So keep that in mind, especially those moments when you feel like shrinking. Accommodations are not extra. It's not a bonus you're getting. This is what you're entitled to. And all of us here, I'm sure, already advocating on some level. To get a sense of that, we have a quiz. Everybody loves quiz. Everybody's going to pass. It's going to be awesome. Encourage everyone to respond. And I believe Daniel's going to make that quiz magically appear. Oh, it is magic. So what category of your rights do you have to advocate for the most often, your or your child's? Educational, access, insurance coverage. I know there are many other categories, and I love that just seeing the bars change and flip, because that's how my day feels. After this, there are so many customer service phone calls, and if anyone wants to do those for me, yes. It looks like insurance coverage is a big one, and education and access are equal. We will be talking about all of those things and more, because they're all so important, and we're often learning these things from the ground up. And I was going to ask the question of if we really think one person can make a difference in our advocacy. I think our panel speaks for themselves on that. They're pretty remarkable. Michele, what is the best way to approach advocacy, whether it is a new situation, whether it is becoming an advocate, if there's someone who we are or might possibly be at odds with, what do we do?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think All Wheels Up and myself have a different viewpoint and have built our organization based on evidence-based research, as well as really meeting, you know, the, in our case, the airlines, you know, in the middle in regards to improve access. And what do I mean by, you know, meeting in the middle? Is, you know, All Wheels Up funds the research for accessible air travel. So we were the first organization to crash test wheelchairs and tie down systems for a wheelchair spot on airplanes. I really do hope a lot of you are seeing some of that stuff, you know, happening in the news, and it's, you know, we're really progressing there nicely. You know, and we got a lot of pushback from the communities and other people saying, you know, we shouldn't be paying for research. You know, that should be on the airlines. And, you know, my position is, you know, families pay for research for cures for, you know, for their families. And so, you know, we modeled ourselves after a cure-based nonprofit, right? We fund the seed funding, and just like pharma would come along and pay for the rest of that investment, now we're seeing the airlines do, or not necessarily the airlines, the OEMs like the seating manufacturers and the airframers like an Airbus and Boeing doing just that. So that's, you know, we've partnered with and not been adversaries with an industry that I think has a lot of probably bad, you know, media out there when it comes to peoples with disabilities.
And I know you've spoken too about just going in with a positive attitude of we are going to get this done, and not always coming in being adversarial. I know for so many of us, that's a hard one to do. Whether it is with access, whether it is, Bo, I'm going to you, is with education. It can be so hard. IEPs education can, and sometimes beautifully, go very well and not be adversarial. But Bo, why are we fighting these fights? Why is any of this complicated and feels like a fight with our school?
I think it really is difficult because time is the enemy. You know, the longer you go without having your IEP meeting, the longer you go without getting some good testing in place, some evaluations, and really making some decisions as an IEP team, the worse it is for your kid. And the school district knows that. So like Benita mentioned earlier about recording, I love recording everything. In Maine, we're allowed to do it without even telling anybody. But I went into a meeting, I remember, with this our special ed director, who was like, he was an animal. I mean, you come into the room and immediately he just finds something to pick a fight with you. He was really difficult. And so I told him I was going to record the meeting, and he did one of these, like the standing up, you know, to end the meeting thing. He's like, well, then we're not going to proceed. And I was like, yeah, well, it's legal in Maine. I'm allowed to record the meeting. And he insisted. He's like, you record it, we don't proceed, like reschedule. So he starts to walk out of the room, and I'm thinking like, all right, do I really want to blow this up? You know, technically I'm right and the law is on my side, but the fact is, if Tess doesn't have this IEP meeting today, it's going to be in like 6 or 8 weeks, and that's terrible for her. And this guy knows that. And so, like, I've been litigating since 2000. I mean, if somebody fires a shot across the bow, my first instinct is to like bring the noise, but I just know that that's going to be bad for Tess. So at the time, I thought, all right, let me just take a beat here and try to figure out, like, do I really think I need to record this meeting necessarily? What would happen if I didn't? And would my rights still be preserved? Could I just take some good notes and still get the same result? Like, you know, it involves giving some ground to this guy, which I really didn't want to do. But he knew that, you know, I needed to proceed that day. And so I just made it work. I was like, okay, you know, let's just chill out. Let's take the temperature down a little bit. I'm not going to record. Let's just proceed. And it ended up being fine. Like Tess's meeting ended up being okay. And, you know, it wasn't a big deal, but I think, you know, trying to think about it in terms of collaboration and recognizing that there are almost always going to be people on that team in your IEP who are on your side. Like more often than not, what I've found is the special ed director might be ready to go to war with you, but your kid's teacher, the person who's like with them every day and knows them, and in Tessa's case, loves them, is like, yeah, whatever you need, I'm going to make it happen here. So they're ready to work with you. And just because someone else wants to have a fight doesn't mean you have to. You can just be like, oh, we're going to work together. All right, good.
Right. And as you mentioned, you're in Maine and it is legal to do that recording. There are many variations from state to state. The law IDEA is a federal law that gives students access to a free and appropriate public education. And states do and can interpret that differently. So don't record a meeting until you've Googled, but there are federal protections in place for your child to access their education. The ADA is the inroads to access to the rest of the world and our environment around us. Benita, with the ADA in place, can we just expect these accommodations to be made going into situations? And what do we do if they are not?
Unfortunately, absolutely not. They need notice, right? You can't just expect to get accommodations without explaining something. Now, do you necessarily have to disclose every single detail? No. I'm going to give the lawyer the answer of it depends. Bo's smiling because he knew right away. I was going to say that. It depends is what we learned in law school, right? It depends. It depends. In school, as a really good example, say a child has what was then juvenile diabetes, now type 1, right? Type 1 brittle diabetic. Type 1 means you need insulin. You kind of have to disclose that your child has diabetes to make sure not only do they get their insulin, but of course, to make sure that they have, orange juice if they end up having a sugar crash, if they end up, having diabetic coma, for example, scary stuff. If the school isn't aware of that, they can't do anything about that. So yes, in some instances, you absolutely have to disclose the name of the condition. As an adult in the workforce, your rare kiddo turns into a rare adult. You don't have to disclose the name of the condition. You have to disclose something. You can't just say, I need this without saying a little bit. You have to at least acknowledge, I have a condition, it's under treatment. This is what I need though, in order to be able to perform the essential functions of my job, because that's the wording for reasonable accommodations in the workplace, essential functions of a job. So you have to disclose something. Do you want to disclose every single detail? No. But you do need to disclose that my child has these needs. My child has dyslexia. My child has, is on the spectrum. Child on a spectrum, you definitely need to disclose that much because their needs are going to be wildly different. That's just the reality. You have to really disclose enough so that they can understand what's going on, so that you can then get what you need. Classic example I can give from my own life as a child, I could not see what was written on chalkboard. Honest to God, I could sit in the front row, which is what they always gave me, preferential seating, but I could not see what was written on the chalkboard. It didn't occur to me why until I started driving and realizing, oh, I could see black on white. So one-way signs, speed limit signs, but I can't see Garden State Parkway signs. Something about that. What is that called? I didn't find out until my 30s when I got actual testing. Oh, poor contrast. That explains why I can't see the chalk that's light on a dark background, which is why I struggled in school all those years. But as a child, I couldn't verbalize that. I tried to tell my teachers that. I tried to tell my parents that. All I got was that I must be lazy. I'm not working hard enough, so on and so forth. I eventually gave up. I remember thinking to myself, well, my situation makes no sense to me. I guess I really can't expect them to understand what it is I'm going through. And I kind of had to just go through it on my own, which was very hard. In hindsight, I wish I'd known that maybe I could have had a note taker, which would have made my life a heck of a lot easier. But at least in the 80s, that just really was unheard of. Today, I know that there are so many more resources, partially because there is more knowledge. But even with all that knowledge, there's still a lack of knowledge from society in general. And so that's why you can't just say, my kid needs extra time. My kid needs breaks. My kid needs, water in the classroom. Let's say they have POTS, for example. My kid needs salt because, again, something like POTS, if you don't have hydration and salt, the odds are you're going to pass out. Most people aren't familiar with these kinds of conditions. So you do have to explain something, but you don't have to go into the nitty-gritty everyday detail. You want to spare your child, that embarrassment as well, right? They don't want everyone to know everything that they're going through. So that's why I would say you have to really kind of draw the line of sharing too much and not sharing enough.
And I love in the chat, I just want to highlight something somebody said. Sometimes people are just being nosy. Holy cow. I bet we've all gotten some degree of that. My son's disabilities are visible and quite obvious. Other folks' disabilities are not visible and are not obvious. And it is definitely worth thinking in advance in what situations are you comfortable disclosing some or all of the details. You are never obligated to disclose all of your personal or your child's personal medical information. And to the extent that your child is able, my son's communication is emerging. He is not yet able to have these discussions. But to the extent that you are able, if you are a parent of a child with a disability, to have the conversation with them where consent comes into play and where they are able to give their consent or not. If somebody asks in the grocery store, hey, what's up with you? We get that. What's up with us is that we're awesome. And really involve your child and their consent to the fullest extent possible. And that is such a great way to teach that self-advocacy. We could go on about that all day. Ideally, all of our advocacy moments will go really well and go perfectly at school, on an airplane, in our community, at work. Bo touched on this a little bit, but for all three of you, what advice do you have when you are advocating in the moment and it's just not going well?
I would say take a deep breath. You don't want to say something you're going to regret. And at the same time, you don't want to give away your power. If they see that you're upset, you've just lost that battle. So the big thing would be take a deep breath and then let that silence do the talking a little bit. It'll calm down your nervous system. It'll just lower the temperature altogether. And I'm seeing the conversation in the chat. So that's not just in an IEP meeting. That's not just in the doctor's office. That's also with dealing with insurance companies when you're dealing with, trying to fight a claim or trying to get something covered. Take a deep breath before you fight and yell and scream, because that's not going to help. Ask for a supervisor. Ask to speak with someone who might be above them.
Love all of that. Bo or Michele, did you want to jump in?
Yes, specific to air travel, of course, I love the deep breath. That you're going to need it if something happens to your medical device while flying, or if you're being discriminated against, but there are things that you can do and that you need to do before you leave the airport, to make sure that these things are documented. So the first thing I would recommend is there's something called the complaint resolution official at every airport for every airline, if they are a United States air carrier, and they will be able to specifically help you through the process of any issues that you're having while you're there. Or whether it's pre-flight or post-flight. If you have, say, your wheelchair damage or you've been discriminated against, please make a complaint to not just your airline, but also the DOT, because everybody says, I don't want to be a statistic, but we need the numbers, we need that statistic so we can make change. When we see that the numbers of wheelchairs are at the number that they're being damaged and they're going up, those are the numbers that are able to make change, right? For example, when we first started collecting this data, I think back in 2020, I think it was, 23 wheelchairs a day are being damaged. Well, that number is going up and not down. And so that's really is what's spurring on I would say that the airline industry is really engaging in this, because they need that data to engage. It really just comes down to, we can tell them all day long these things are happening, but until it's actually black and white in front of them, it doesn't exist. If you are injured during your flight at the airport or during a transfer and you need medical attention, please do not get that medical attention on your own after you leave the airport. I would highly recommend getting an ambulance from the airport, because if you do not do that, the airlines or the airport are no longer liable. And so those are just some tips.
And Bo, I know you already talked about your specific instance of evaluating really what is worth it and what are you getting out of this moment. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a magic word that people can use in an IEP meeting. Janet in the chat kind of touched on it a little bit. She said somebody says, like, I'm not comfortable with that. That's a great way to put it. But like the word that I think is crucial to use is concern. If you're a parent, you're in an IEP meeting and you use the word concern, like my wife and I are concerned, my husband and I are concerned. It's just kind of a magic word legally, in the sense that, like, once you're concerned, they have to take a note about it. Like, the school district needs to make a record of you saying what you're concerned about. And that's supposed to go into the IEP itself, like the actual document. So, I think I may have said this earlier, but unless you put something in writing, generally with school districts, it's like it never happened. So you can have all the phone calls in the world with, your child's teacher or whoever, people that you trust, but unless it's in writing, don't be surprised if suddenly people act like it never happened. So putting things in writing really makes a big difference. And just saying, like, we're concerned about this in that moment, I think they kind of have to listen to that legally. It's not something they can just brush aside.
I was literally writing that down for the IEP meeting that we have coming up. Thank you for that. And I will also add that when we're thinking about our IEPs, that goals drive services. So being sure that you are thinking about what are the goals, both what is written specifically in the IEP and big picture goals. And I think big picture touches into all of our areas of advocacy of what is the future that we are working towards. And in the rare disease world, global genes leading the way on all of that. And within our own lives and our own advocacy situations, we can be working towards either the goals that are driving the services at school or towards the goals of immediate or big picture air travel, figure insurance, all of these things, that it really does matter. Wanted to highlight a couple more things in the chat. And I know Michele had touched on this. TSA Cares is something that is available. And Michele said it's different than the wheelchair agents. So I'll do a quick TSA Cares, but know that it is different than the wheelchair agents. And for that access, you do need to have the specific people with the wheelchair knowledge, experience, and job. TSA Cares is they have a phone number that you can call, and you can call in advance of a flight and saying that you are traveling either as a person or with a person with a disability, and request accommodations. Depending on which airport you are at, those accommodations will be presented differently, and that is allowed to happen. It could be for someone like my son who's not able to wait in the lines, to have someone to walk you through the security lines. It can be someone like my son who travels with a whole ton of liquids, knowing that in advance and being able to check those liquids through differently and with prior knowledge. We even let them know that our service dog is traveling with us. So that is something. No, it will be delivered differently at each airport. Certainly the size of the airport and staff can play into that, but it's worth checking out. Something from a little bit earlier in the chat, when Benita had said, people said she was lazy, and we're all like, you are not lazy. That's such a gross word for so many reasons, and somebody addressed that in the chat saying this is behavior, and that is absolutely right. All behavior is communication, and certainly for the people who are coming into the meeting puffing up their chests with the chip on their shoulder, that's communicating something. And also with our kids, whatever the behavior is, if we're able to view that as communication, someone said in the chat, there's always a reason for that behavior. And I think so many of us experience that firsthand. Something else I want to circle back to that Michele said earlier that is so impressive in the work that you're doing is evidence-based research. I think anytime we can point to things that are real, that are evidence-based, that are research, or that are the law, that really furthers our advocacy and allows us to remain calm and neutral and relying on those things. The one place in my advocacy, the one time when I have just lost my fill in the blank, was with an insurance company. That was something that was, tied with for importance in our quiz. Benita, insurance companies, holy cow, how do we make the most of our insurance plan? And how do we do that in a way that it's not a full-time job and it doesn't make us just want to explode?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does feel like, from a patient perspective, and I'm sure for parents as well, that dealing with insurance is like a full-time job in and of itself, aside from our other full-time day jobs, right? And so one of the things that I highly recommend is, first of all, get familiar with your policy. I can't stress it enough. So many times people just have a basic, bare sense of what their benefits are. Read the plan documents, read the summary, read the document, find out what the grievance policy and procedure is, and follow that procedure. Oftentimes the people you're talking to on the phone, they're customer service reps. They don't necessarily know anything. They're usually not from this country, they're overseas, they may not understand what it is that you're even saying. So the first step is read the policy. It is available on your insurance company's website. Every year when you renew, we're getting into open enrollment season right now. Read everything, download everything, save everything. That way you have it in front of you. Get familiar with it first. Document every phone call. Someone wrote in the chat about the importance of writing. Write. Email, because now there's a paper trail. There's an email trail, right? They can't say, oh, we didn't get this. You sent an email. Save those emails if you can. If you can't save it in their platform, copy and paste your email. Put it in a Word document and then email it to yourself, because now you've got proof that you actually sent it. Follow up is key. I like to diary this. I did this, for a living, handling medical records requests and so on and so forth. I got into a system where I would diary my calendar, 1 week follow-up, 30-day follow-up, so on and so forth. Ask for a supervisor. Supervisors will generally have more information, might have more polls, so on and so forth. And work with case managers. If you have really highly specialized care that you need for your rare kiddos, you might need to have a case manager from the insurance company. Some insurance companies do offer that. Sometimes it's a way to reduce the claims that they have to pay out and reduce medical treatment, but sometimes apparently they actually look into a win-win situation to try to help people navigate and coordinate better care. So sometimes it can actually be useful. But that's the first thing I would say. Be familiar with your policy. Don't deal with them and have them tell you what to do. Know it ahead of time, and you might get a little bit further, because if you come across as someone who's knowledgeable, they're more likely going to treat you very differently than if you come across as someone that they can just pull the wool over your eyes.
I love all of that, and I wish we could rewind and just listen to that all again, because I think for many of us that is so much to take in, because exactly what you were saying, so many of us don't really know what our insurance plan is or does or covers, and we kind of cower from it. To just break down a little bit what you said, if people have not read through their insurance plan, maybe not exactly what you're dying to do, but go to your insurance company's website. It might be called a summary of plan benefits. It might be called an explanation of benefits. Download the PDF, and you can read the whole thing, or you can look specifically for the things that are your concerns in the moment. And my favorite way to do that is to do a find on my computer. It's Control and F, and type in a keyword: durable medical equipment, speech therapy, whatever key thing. If you don't have the stamina to read through the whole plan, I do not, then you can do these searches and you can find these immediate things. If you cannot find it in your benefit or in your explanation of benefits, then you can call the customer service and you can say, I was unable to find this in the explanation of benefits. Please tell me exactly where and what page and what the language is that I can find this on. And if they do not have that for you, they can escalate that, and someone will be able to show you exactly where that is. You might learn you only have 4 speech therapy visits or none, or you might have unlimited. Sometimes the answer you will find in your plan is not the answer you want to hear, but knowing that answer will save you time so that you can be fighting the right battles, and you can be fighting battles that you can and should be winning. When we are having to appeal, and I know we're starting to get close to time, so Benita or anyone else, if you want to speak briefly on if we need to appeal to our insurance company, is there a quick, like, here's the best way to do it?
Sure. So first of all, you'll receive generally an explanation of benefits when they process a claim. That's going to tell you exactly how much they're covering, what your own responsibility might be, co-pays, co-insurance, so on and so forth. And it will also include little asterisks or carrots or whatever to give you the different codes for why certain thing may not have been covered fully or not at all. That's your starting point. That's going to give you some window as to what it is that they're objecting to in terms of why they're denying your claim. The next step is, again, go through and see what is the process for filing an appeal. What do you need to do? Oftentimes you need more documentation. That means working with your provider's office generally to see if they can provide the documentation that they are requiring and looking for. A big thing to look for that a lot of people are not aware of, that I only found out really just a few years ago, is look to see the type of provider that issued that denial, that reviewed the records. Because oftentimes what insurance companies do is they hire all these providers, nurse managers, nurses, whatever, doctors outside of the specialty for which you have your child under treatment with. So let's say, for example, you have a rheumatology issue and it's a rheumatologist who should be reviewing records. Oftentimes, if you do the research on the provider who's reviewing the records and issuing the denials, they tend to be outside the specialty. And that's actually grounds to claim for an appeal, because if there's someone who doesn't have the expertise, how can they really issue a denial? They don't know what it is they're really talking about. They're just going by whatever the company's telling them to do, but they don't have the actual knowledge and expertise. So that is absolutely grounds for an appeal. So things like that are things to look for. Who actually denied? What were the reasons for the denial? Look for codes. Look for what the procedures are. So they might say you need, this much documentation. Work with your providers. Oftentimes, because providers are so busy these days, they might not be inclined to write an appeal for you. So you might have to make it easier for them and do some of the work yourself to help them file an appeal on your behalf. Oftentimes, there's peer-to-peer challenges, right? There's something called peer-to-peer review. So that's another level of an appeal. There are different levels of appeals, but you have to first know what the process is.
And I have heard that from other insurance specialists and attorneys before, of who is the person reviewing your claim. This is where rare disease really comes into play. I have talked to lawyers who help clients fight this stuff, who've said very often the person who evaluated the claim and we're on the phone with them has never heard of this before. Not, or they kind of familiar, they don't know what it is. With rare disease, I'm sure we've all encountered this, where people don't know because, of course, they don't know, and that's why we're educating them. But be really aware of that, because that can make all the difference in the world. I know we are starting to get close to time when we'll open up for questions. Panelists, you guys are amazing. I would love for you to just let us know, what is a takeaway that you would really like everyone here and everyone listening in the future to take away from this important advocacy conversation? And Bo, you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. So I haven't really talked about it a lot during this discussion, but some of my work has to do with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it's kind of meant to cover what Benita mentioned before, an impairment, whether physical or mental, that substantially limits a major life activity. And so it's kind of like when you go into special ed, if you're not on an IEP, if you don't qualify under one of those 13 categories, sometimes you'll end up on a 504 plan. And usually by the time someone gets into my office, it's because the 504 plan was a hot mess and didn't work at all. And the person is like having a terrible education experience. But what I would say is, when you're in your school district, they really want to get you onto a 504 plan. It's so much easier for them. It's so much less work. It costs them almost no money. And so if there's a way that you can push to try to get the evaluation that you need or whatever you need in order to get onto an IEP instead of 504, it's so much better for you. My experience with 504s is that you get these accommodations. It's all about access to your education, kind of trying to level the playing field and make sure that there's equality for everybody. So, if your impairment is about maybe an attention issue, right? You have ADHD, and so you get preferential seating and you get extra time to do your work. But more often than not, those 504 plans put the burden on the student. And most of the ones that I see are in middle school. And it's basically like, raise your hand if you're a middle schooler and you want to like tell everyone how different you are and call attention to your differences. Like, No middle schooler in the world wants to do that. So they keep quiet. They don't ask for extra time. They don't ask for the preferential seating that they need. And they just end up getting nothing as a result. And so I guess my takeaway, what I'm trying to say is if you can get onto an IEP instead of a 504, definitely do it. It's so much better for you, so much better for your kids' education.
I love that. And as the parent of 2 middle schoolers, yes, to all of
Right?
that. Right? Exactly. Michele, I love everything you're presenting. What is a big takeaway you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, if the airlines and the airport don't know you're coming, they're not prepared for you. So, I would say my biggest, takeaway is, after you book your flight, call them, call the airlines, call the airport. So when you get there, I'm not saying you're not going to still have problems, but at least they're prepared for you. I think that's, something that a lot of people don't know. And there are a lot of resources out there. They are on our website. You can see all of them, and we're honestly taking 2026 to actually make that even more robust because there is just a lot out there. We're not looking to recreate the wheel. Obviously, we've talked about TSA Cares, but then you have the Hidden Disabilities Lanyard, which is the Sunflower Lanyard. So if you have a hidden disability but still need help, people in the airport know to approach you, and you don't, are just out there floundering on your own. And then there's just even products that you can buy, and they're on our website and things like that that might help, with your air travel. So.
Great. Thank you. And do you also have sunflower lanyards on your website of the thing?
Not yet. We should. Yeah. Look at us in 2026. But yeah.
Amazing. I know you guys are doing so many things. And Benita, what's a takeaway that you would like us to leave with?
Sure. So we haven't really touched upon this too much at all, really, but medical records are something that parents can absolutely have access to. In the United States, we also have, through the Open Notes Act, access to our clinicians' notes. So that means not just the visit summary, but also their actual notes. Other than that psychology notes still aren't available to us, but actual other clinicians' medical notes, their clinical notes are available to us. You can find them on MyChart or any other electronic medical record, Follow My Health, so on and so forth. You can also access them physically. You can, request medical records. Usually providers' offices will have the form available online. You can call their office and request records that way, get them, review them, find the mistakes, because believe me, they're there. Know that when your child turns 18 at the age of majority, they do have the right to restrict access. So if you're a parent and maybe you don't understand as much, or maybe they feel that you're not very supportive, they can decide that they don't want you to have access to all their information. But under the age of 18, obviously you're their advocate, fight for them, get their records, understand what's going on.
And the medical records, not only should they be and reflect the encounter, but they can be used in your IEP process, in getting access and accommodations. They can be used in many ways, because it is that evidence fact-based information that we were talking about. We'll open up to questions in a minute, but quickly, so we don't forget, wanted to let you know where you can find everyone. Michele, All Wheels Up, Benita, Thrive at Work Consulting.com, Bo, RareDiseaseFilmFestival.com. He also hosts a podcast, PortlandRootMedia.com/Stronger Podcast. My website is Kelley, Kelley, Coleman.com. And we would love to hear from people with specific questions.
Yeah, thanks, Kelley. And thank you all on the panel. This has been great. And not surprisingly, we have a lot of interest from the audience. So Danielle has asked an insurance related question. Her son requires a specialist who's out of state, but her insurance doesn't cover anything out of state. Are there resources for this? Or could she have 2 insurances based in 2 different states, and she's referring to private insurance?
So there can be one-off exceptions made. So for example, if there's not a similar specialist available in your state, you can actually appeal that and make an argument for why that specialist that's out of the state can actually and should be covered.
And additionally, I just helped a friend with this, going back to your explanation of benefits for emergency situations and for things that are outside of your area. They often will speak to that.
Okay, and another related to insurance question, Nikki is asking, can we get advice on getting insurance coverage for off-label prescription use drugs in rare conditions?
Yeah, once again, if this is something where you can show that it can be used for something off-label, typically there's a step-by-step process. They can make exceptions. You just have to show that everything else has failed. So typically, insurance companies have a formulary where they show, and you can find the formulary on your insurance company's website, similar to what Kelley had said before. You can call them, they can show you exactly where to find the formulary on the company's website, usually like my plan documents or something like that. It'll show you exactly what order drugs are prescribed that are covered. So it'll say, you know, this medication is first, this medication is second, this medication is third, this medication is fourth. After everything else failed, then typically they'll allow it. And basically it goes by cost, right? So they want you to have the most affordable, you know, medications first, and then as it gets more expensive, they go into the next level of the tiers. But if you try everything and you fail everything, now you have the argument for why something off-label should be prescribed to you.
Thanks, Benita.
Welcome.
Michele, here is a question about air travel. Christine says she was injured and her wheelchair was damaged in July during travel involving both the airline and TSA. She received 3 apology letters from the airline, no admission from TSA. Who can help her follow through with this case? Her wheelchair has been repaired. An injury claim is sitting with the airline insurance claim specialist, but she feels she needs support. And who can she connect with for that?
Yeah, interesting. Again, TSA doesn't handle wheelchairs at all. So if they are the organization that is literally just getting you through the security checkpoint, and that is the only area that they have responsibility in. So your wheelchair was probably damaged through the airline with their baggage handlers, and the responsibility comes from the airlines, and they're supposed to repair it, which they typically do through a third-party organization. I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but that doesn't matter. If you've received the apology letter and you've received, I guess, a repaired wheelchair, I guess, what is the next thing you're looking for?
Hi. So TSA actually sent me into medical crisis while they received the accommodation information, but ignored it despite me saying, look, if you do this, you will hurt me. Please don't do this. Here's what I can do. And it was all denied through a process of even other female agents would not assist this particular representative because they knew it would be a problem. And it happened anyway. By the time it actually was, it was part of stiff person syndrome. I was not functional. I could barely think. And literally, as soon as I was even remotely able to move in my wheelchair, I was zipped off to the airplane and put on the airplane. So I know you mentioned getting medical attention at that time. There was no time. It was one thing and then the other. I could barely sit up and breathe, let alone be on the airplane. So, but it's at the claim specialist right now.
Yeah, and I would say that if you are in crisis, then your flight could wait, and then you can be treated at a hospital for your injuries that TSA created. Now TSA is just getting you through TSA, and then you have your wheelchair agents that transfer you into your airplane seats. So just making sure that we
It was my
understand.
caregiver, there was
Yeah.
no, like, it was just us. Actually, the Delta representative, the CRO, helped me physically get on the plane, but I wasn't aware enough to be able to ask for that kind of help. So essentially moving forward, is there an agency or legal entity that can help? I'm already, at their claims. It's already been escalated. So I just need help getting through the rest of it, I guess, is where I'm at.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, just for the sake of the conversation, you can contact us through my website because I'm not understanding if, if the airlines have repaired the wheelchair. I'm not exactly sure, and they've apologized. I'm not exactly sure what the next steps are that you're looking for.
It's with TSA, but I'll contact you and we can talk.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Christine. And thanks, Michele.
Yep, thank you.
So Nikki has asked regarding IDEA, how will we be able to enforce IDEA with the recent large government cuts we've seen? If the law is there, but maybe the people responsible for upholding it aren't there. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I can answer that. So at least where we are in Maine, the primary method of enforcing your rights under the IDA are actually to go in front of a Maine body, go in front of a hearing officer that works for the state of Maine. And there's a Maine law, a whole body of Maine law that pretty much mirrors what the IDEA says. So, the feds are going to do what they're going to do, but here in Maine, at least, you're still going to be able to go to hearings. You're going to be able to enforce your rights and do what you need to do. I honestly don't know what's going on in the rest of the country. I'm literally only practicing in Maine, so I don't know. But and I know there are definitely some jurisdictions where people are not doing as well, and it literally has nothing. I don't think it has anything to do with the federal government. I think just sometimes there are different states that don't have as robust an enforcement mechanism as others. But that's at least how things are here.
Thanks. Another one, Jan. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to add, if you are looking for specifics on your state, even if things may be changing, every state has parent training and information centers. If you Google parent training and information center, it will pull up a list. You can pull up specific to your state, sometimes many locations within the state, and those are free resources where they can give you information that is specific to your area.
Great. Another question Janet is asking, her son has, it seems, multiple diagnoses, including ADHD, and he's done community college and gotten part-time jobs, but he's experiencing that he's typically pushed in those jobs to fewer and fewer hours, and then maybe pushed to the point of where he's terminated. So, and this is stated because he's too slow, and her question is this legal?
Wow, I need to take a minute just to even collect my thoughts here because I have so many choice words to say about that one. That is just terrible, first of all, to hear that. I would say it could be if they're not able to keep up with essential functions and things like that. However, I think that the best thing to do would be to contact your state, see if you can get in touch with local rehab, local rehabilitation, see if maybe they can get a job coach because those resources are out there. And maybe if they are slow, maybe they can have a job coach, like see exactly how they're performing, see what recommendations they can make, see if other people could help them do their job. I don't necessarily think this is illegal, I think if they can make the argument of their performance just wasn't good, that giving them anything was undue hardship to the company, which doesn't feel like it could be true. Without knowing the exact specifics, I can't really say one thing or the other, and I certainly don't want to give legal advice online. But I would say the first thing to do would be go contact your state voc rehabilitation and see if they can utilize a job coach.
Yeah, thank you.
Naturally,
Michele, someone is asking, can you talk about air travel rights that are not specific to a wheelchair, but instead maybe other necessary medical equipment or medications that you need to stay with you in the cabin?
Yeah, you can bring all of your equipment as well as all of your medical liquids on the flight with you. For example, I know this one is specific to a wheelchair, but if you were taking parts off of your wheelchair to be stowed and you wanted to take those parts onto the aircraft with you, that can stay with you. Also, if you can prove that everything in a suitcase is for medical purposes, you will not be charged for that suitcase. But make sure they cannot find any garments or non-medical, things in there, or you will be charged for that extra suitcase that is that you want to bring for your, medical devices and prescriptions. Also, again, this is for wheelchairs. The front cabin closet is for your wheelchair. The flight attendants and the pilots, they will fight you for it for, their stowed luggage. But legally, it is for your foldable wheelchair, and you can fight for that. But until the airlines actually start getting fined for that, or the pilots themselves get fined for that, I don't think we'll win that battle.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you that very thing, Michele, the sad story of all of us, I think, assume that little closet space is for the flight attendants, and it's actually meant for the wheelchairs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think they think that too.
Here's another question that came out of the chat, which is basically, where can we get service dogs? There seems to be a backlist and they're not available. And I think, if I remember, Bo, didn't you have an experience with a not entirely qualified service dog? But that may be an option.
That was just luck. We went to get a rescue dog, and he had actually gone through all the training to be a service dog, but was not. I think he was. This is such a weird story. He was working on a farm, and as part of his training, he was supposed to go from point A to point B, and instead of doing that, he broke out of formation and went and ate a live chicken, and I guess that has you flunk the training for service dog. But he had gone through 90% of it, so we got him not for service dog prices, but for just rescue dog prices, and he was really great with Tess because she was really little and she'd yank on his ears and do all this stuff, and he would never react. He would always just be like, okay, I'm gonna roll with this because I have my service dog training. So I wish I had some good advice to give somebody, but for us it was just luck.
And I can speak to our service dog experience with our son's service dog. We were matched with the dog through an organization called Canine Companions, and they provide dogs for many but not all disabilities, and accommodations need to be addressed. The number one thing, and I know it's legwork and time, but call and have an actual conversation with a human at the organization. If you are going through an organization, there are some wonderful and very legitimate trainers who will train a dog who has not gone through an organization, but really be sure those are vetted and that the dog is being trained to perform a task for a person with a disability. That is what the law covers, is performing specific tasks, not being an emotional support animal. In this group, we know that emotional support animals can be incredibly necessary and beneficial. Unfortunately, the people outside of this group, a lot of them have ruined that for us with faking it. But to have a dog with public access, it is a task. Unfortunately, there are long wait lists for many organizations, but I recommend getting on the wait list because it's not unusual for your name to come up sooner than they had anticipated. Unfortunately, there's no magic skip the line pass, but when you find the right organization for you, it is worth the wait.
Great. Mary Erwin is asking, are funds available to rare disease charities to help transport children to clinical trials in the US?
Transport like vehicles or for flying?
I think she means flights. She did say this was a question for you, Michele. So I think
Oh, she did. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I should have said that.
Yeah. Gosh, not that I am aware of. I think that's something that you could ask the pharmaceutical companies that's working on the clinical trials. I know that we are working on this very project of a wheelchair spot on airplanes and things like that, and improved access because they're seeing such high levels of clinical trial dropout from people with disabilities. So if that is something that is, I guess, the barrier, I'm sure that's something that the pharmaceutical company could help with.
And there are some charity organizations that are doing free medical flights for people in need. And someone here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it might be Angel Flights or Care Flights, or perhaps two different organizations doing that. This will probably be our last question we have time for. Mary is saying that her insurance company is difficult on the issue of her physical therapy. She has hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. She essentially needs more like constant physical therapy, but is only approved for 4 sessions at a time on intervals that are not ideal. So how can she fight that to get more or better appointments approved?
So I actually have hypermobile EDS, so I'm a little familiar with this issue. Typically, your insurance policy may say you have 30 visits or 60. I once had a policy that had over 100, which was amazing. Sometimes the policies will say you only have 30 per body part, so you have to look at it carefully and see whether it's 30 altogether or 30 for one part, 30 for another part, and it could be, everything, physical therapy, speech therapy, therapy, all that rolled in one. So again, look at your policy. This is one of those instances where if you are not making enough progress, that's why they're starting to say, okay, no, we don't think that you're going to benefit, therefore we can't justify continuing paying out these claims. Your provider, the referring provider, has to be the one to provide the documentation in support of continuing physical therapy. If your physical therapist notes aren't supporting it, then the odds are you're not going to get the extra physical therapy that you need. If you can show continuous improvement, some level of improvement, then you can make the case that, look, I'm making improvement. There's a reason why I need this. I can keep going. But if you're starting to plateau, the odds are you're not going to be able to win that argument.
Thank you so much. And thank you all on the panel and all the people that asked questions. This has really been great. I'm going to just wrap us up a little bit, but really we're in luck because the person wrapping us up will be our CEO, Charlene Sum-Rigby, who not only leads Global Genes, but is a rare mom herself. These resources will be available. You can screen grab them now, but it's easier to have the links when you get the slides. So just a few more related resources. Again, these will all be on the website when you find the recording for this. A few takeaway points to serve as reminders. And of course, if you could take a survey to tell us what you thought of this session or how we could improve a similar session in the future. And with that, I will give the floor to Charlene, who I'm sure will also thank all these sponsors.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And thank you to our really insightful speakers for a very dynamic panel today. So I get the honor of closing our session up. And with this session, we are wrapping up our year-long Rare Advocacy Exchange. And so we kicked this off in March with a literal rare disease rock star, and showed us how we can respond when leadership is thrust upon us, which happens to so many of us. And today we wrap things up with the rare rights leaders that we were just hearing from. So we also had, getting a precise genetic diagnosis as well as interacting with the FDA. And so through this series, we've really tackled strategic, emotional, clinical, and systemic dimensions of leadership in rare disease advocacy. So, with empowering leaders in rare advocacy, we explored the importance of harnessing your true values to fuel your leadership. We explored how AI-driven platforms in telehealth are transforming genetic testing, and highlighted in the session on precise genetic diagnosis. So, underscoring the importance of timely, accurate information for families who are navigating diagnostic odysseys. In navigating advocacy dynamics from conflict to competition, from conflict, oh gosh, there's lots of C's in this one. I remember this now, Daniel. From conflict and competition to where we want to get to, cooperation and collaboration, we learned how organizations can overcome founder syndrome, avoid turf wars, and build a stronger, united movement for change. In thinking outside of the box, we explored innovative fundraising opportunities. Honoring the emotional journey, grieving a rare diagnosis reminded us that advocacy begins with empathy. This session validated the complex emotions families face and emphasized the need for mental health support within our rare disease communities. Turning conversations into action. So, each panel offered the opportunity not for just stories, but strategies, as we saw today. And, this includes fostering cross-organizational partnerships to communicating with regulators. And hopefully we can all carry this forward into our own advocacy work. So I want to close with thanks. Thank you to our valued sponsors, our amazing speakers, and our every session, our engaged audience of change makers who made this series a space for growth, connection, and transformation. We hope you came away from this series better equipped as leaders, more ready to improve the lives of those in our rare disease community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlene. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panel and Kelley for moderating it so well. That concludes the series. Tell your friends, find the replay videos if they need to see them.